You're listening to the White Blood Cells podcast.
Yeah, what's my text messages? Did the topics make any sense? Or I know it's hard by like 5-word text messages to make sense out of those things. Comedians, though, is something I kind of like that.
Well,
one.
it's funny to me. What I was thinking about is Bill Burr. What I noticed is that sometimes he seems like he's a liberal, and sometimes he seems like he's a conservative.
Yeah.
And like some of the bits that he had today, or that I saw, he was on Jimmy Kimmel or somebody like that.
Yeah.
And he was saying stuff about the fires, and he was making fun of Joe Rogan, or supposedly about saying that it was homeless people, or that it was the government problem. Like he was kind of poking jabs at what people were saying as far as like conspiracy theories about it. And then he was saying about the whole Luigi thing. He was like kind of making fun of like CEOs, like, oh, they're finally getting what they deserve, like all this stuff. And it's like, oh, okay.
I have a hard time following and I'm fine with like somebody not defining themselves in some category,
of course.
in some totally arbitrary category. Like I'm a Republican, totally arbitrary category, bullshit, made up category.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think like I pick up on this thing, like thematically, his stuff doesn't a lot of times line up, and that's kind of an odd thing. I noticed that just yesterday or the day before too.
Okay, yeah. Because for me, I was thinking like, okay, so is he a shill where he's just doing the bidding of wherever we need the consciousness to go? We'll put Bill Burr in there, who's really extreme.
He's our guy.
Yes, like he'll get in there and then start, saying stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a shill. I mean, I really like him. I really know he's a highly intelligent comedian, like all comedians are. That's why I want to like give the credit to these guys. They're intelligent beings to take concepts like he does and make them funny. You have to be like genius level intellect to do that. He's really like, I like his poking into the political realm, because not too many other people have the courage to do that and just bang at people and go full,
that's just not worrying about the consequences.
Right.
Yeah.
That's totally bold and ballsy, and I love that about him.
Jim Brewer, is it Brewer? Is that how you say his name?
I think so.
Oh my goodness, he's funny. I mean, totally what you're saying.
Yeah.
He just goes anywhere.
Does he? I don't watch him a lot, but I know who he is.
He is so funny.
Really? Yeah.
Well, and he's
very Bill Burr-like.
Is he?
Yeah. I would say he's not
in a certain way.
He seems more like California, like West Coast, opposed to Bill Burr's very like East Coast energy.
Yep, for sure. In your face.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then
Well, what do you guys
suggest?
The contrast to that, like a comedian, I don't even know if he's a comedian, because I don't think he's funny at all, is Adam Sandler. What do you guys think about Adam Sandler?
I mean, have you seen Happy Gilmore?
I've never seen all of any one of his. They're all retarded to me, and it's just like, why would I waste my time watching this? And this is part of why I want to bring it up, because I think comedy itself trivializes a lot of really important topics. That's kind of my impression of Bill Burr. Like, it can trivialize it to the point where some of it's not taken seriously. And like Bill Burr's audience then doesn't know, like, am I supposed to do something with what he's saying about? And most of us guys are just watching it, laughing, and then we move on and we don't know what to do. Adam Sandler has no intent to like provoke. At least Bill Burr is provoking some pretty interesting topics. Yeah. Adam Sandler is just infantilizing men. That's what drives me nuts about him and his movies, and they're pretty consistent that's all he's doing. And
yeah, he definitely makes men look stupid.
Yeah.
Like makes us all. He just plays that kind of I'm an idiot role. Like, stop looking at me, Swan.
That's pretty good.
I knew you'd be able to do that interpretation.
My mama said. My mama said.
Did you want to sing one of his songs? What's his song that he?
Thanksgiving.
Lunch lady land.
There you go.
Sloppy Joe, sloppy Joe.
All right, so okay, so there is a little humor in that in his stuff, but at the same time, my mimicking, we're mimicking creatures, and I think he's put out there for us to mimic this, this stupid character.
Well, you think about Homer Simpson from
Homer Simpson.
It's like same thing. It's like, oh, Dad's an idiot, and,
Right.
and just making fun of him, and he can't do anything right.
Well, like you were saying, Greg Costanza from Seinfeld. It's all about and even what's his name, the spaz in Seinfeld.
The
Kramer?
whole Seinfeld
Yeah,
show is about nothing, and that's part of my point. It's not just Adam Sandler. It's like television since the 70s has been to the detriment of guys, to the complete detriment of men.
Yeah, we need Andy Griffith's show to come.
We
back.
need so I've
what
got
I'm
that
saying?
written down. I've got. Did you watch Leave It to Beaver?
Oh yeah, the Beeve.
The Beav?
Oh Wally, come on, gee golly whiz.
Father Knows Best. That's another totally geeky show. But like the contrast being 50s and 60s shows, you got Gunsmoke. I don't know if you ever watched that.
Bonanza.
The Rifleman, Bonanza. Like, look at all those
House
shows.
on the Prairie. That was an awesome
Really
show.
wholesome, really wholesome.
Really wholesome, but the dad, Andy Griffith, is like the most metaphoric thing. That guy was the hero, and there was no question about it, right?
Yeah.
And that's how all those 50s and 60s shows were. The guy was the hero, and there was no question about it. That patriarchy thing wasn't bad at that point, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But then you guys know who Norman Lear is? Norman Lear created, I don't know if he produced or he, like the All in the Family was probably the biggest one.
Okay.
Archie Bunker,
Yeah.
The Jeffersons, Maude,
So like 70s.
Fred Sanford, all
80s,
70s,
early 80s,
all
yeah.
70s shows, like all those shows that started, like Archie Bunker was the dupe, right? I mean, he was the main character, but there's no question he was a dupe.
Yeah.
And the hero in that show was Meathead.
Oh, right.
Remember
Mike,
Meathead?
yeah.
Mike,
Yeah.
Mike, Meathead. Do you remember
no,
that show?
I'm like,
Sally.
You don't.
sorry guys.
Sally Struthers too. She was the other, totally liberal, totally like.
Well, and Edith, even though she was a bumbling idiot, she had a great heart, and she was a hero. Of
She was a
sorts, too.
genuine, like I think was the best character on that show. To be honest with you, I mean, I love Archie Bunker too. Don't get me wrong, but but he was set up to be the racist, prickish, total buffoon, and everybody made fun of him, and that was part of the Norman Lear whole setup. Was these people? Fred Sanford, you've watched Sanford and Son.
Sanford Sons, yeah.
I mean, Fred Sanford was the star of the show, obviously, because he's a talent, but he was the dupe. Lamont, his son, and like all the other all the other characters were the heroes, and Fred was just like kind of his own racist,
bumbling idiot.
right? George Jefferson, again, he was the sweet, but like he was a racist. He was a dupe. The maid and Wheezy, they were the heroes of the show. Remember the maid? She always knew everything. The maid knew everything. Made
Right.
George look like a total dipshit.
So what do you think that was? I mean, what was the programming that you think was starting to take place in the 70s?
Well,
that
that's
they were
what
preparing for.
That's what I want to think about. Like, so do you remember the show Family Ties with Michael J. Fox?
yeah, of course.
Remember the dad?
Uh-huh.
You do?
Yeah.
Because that dad is the most unmemorable person. I mean, I remember him because I remember he was just like a fucking limp noodle nothing. He was a nobody.
But he wasn't the idiot, but he also
wasn't an idiot.
a confident, like, strong male
The
figure.
mom was.
Yeah.
The mom was.
Interesting.
This is the entry of feminism is where I'm going with this. Like it's the complete, like we're going to go counter to whatever happened in the 50s and 60s. I don't think they had anything figured out then. They just wanted to make shows, and they weren't really designing this plan. And so just went along with kind of what culture knew to be the case. The dad is the guy who we all listen to. Father Knows Best. Those shows all made sense. But then I think there was some intentionality in television programming after that. And it started to change with all those shows. And I don't know if you could find Homer Simpson is the greatest because
Well, and
what
then
you're saying.
what was the Love and Marriage with Al Bundy? He was the
Oh
freaking
yeah,
idiot too.
yeah. And Kelly.
Yeah.
They almost
There's a lot of evidence too, to your point, that it started. A lot of this agenda started in the '60s. That the '60s was a CIA plot. I mean, it seems like all counterculture and let's challenge the man. And the '50s and the '40s were really rigid, and the roles were all defined. And men started in the '60s. They started experimenting with colorful clothes and long hair and all that stuff. But there's a lot of credible sources that say that that was a CIA operation. In other words, part of the agenda,
well, that's what I think. I mean,
which shook it up, and then that ushered in the '70s with all the programming and stuff.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Well, once you realize and you kind of get your arms around this whole how much humans are just mimicking creatures, you understand like if they were going to do this, well, this is a perfect game plan to just undermine the credibility and validity of men.
Yeah. Well, I think there was a lot of stuff going on in the 60s and 70s to destabilize the family unit, right? I mean, even the civil rights movement, that kind of ushered in all those things. You also had this boom in divorce from like black, African American families. Like they start like welfare and all that other types of things. It's like, oh, well, now you don't need a man or a strong male figure in the family. Like we'll pay you per kid you have. You don't need to get married, like whatever that is. And so that destabilizes the home.
Yeah, and monogamy was almost looked at as down on,
right,
for the first time.
Right, exactly.
Like, why would you do that? I mean, are you needy?
Right.
You can do it on your own.
The whole sexual revolution thing was anti-family too. So you're right. It's bigger than just feminism. It's an anti-family movement that started then by whomever they are, right? Yeah. But yeah, I mean that's kind of my point about the comedy stuff too. I don't know. Like I don't know if there's necessarily a promotional comedy to me is kind of a unique art form because it is absolutely necessary to our existence as
laughing is good for your soul.
It's good for your soul, and you got to have that element of like we can't all be me and serious talk about like philosophy shit all day long because we'll go nuts. You got to have some levity.
Well, that's what I was thinking when you were talking about Adam Sandler. It's like sometimes I just want to laugh. I don't want to make a point or anything. So there is that element that's necessary. And going back to the other thing, Norman somebody, and I want to say it's not Cousins, but basically was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and was told, the death sentence basically, you have this long to live. We can't do anything else for you. And he decided, you know what? Comedy channel 24/7. And he did that and he healed himself. And the doctors had no explanation. They were trying to science it and be serious and all that, and they couldn't. So there is a real clear healing component to just laughing and just having levity in your life. And a bigger argument would be perspective. Because comedy, I mean, you can choose to see anything as funny or you can choose it to be a teaching point or whatever, right?
Right. Oh, that's why I mean, like it's a really unique art form and it's absolutely necessary for those reasons, right? You have to have that balance. And it's weird because I've talked to a lot of people. Just Adam Sandler came to me sometime in one of my
You've
at
never
3 in the
seen
morning.
a full Adam Sandler
I will not
movie
watch
before?
them. I will not watch them. No, because it just seems so fucking stupid that I can't. I mean, I like a lot of funny stuff.
Yeah, like what?
Like Step Brothers is the funniest movie I've ever seen, and I watch it. I've watched it 100 times, and I still laugh my ass off every time I watch that movie.
Do you like Jim Carrey?
I don't like Jim Carrey.
Okay,
No.
I thought maybe not with
really?
Adam Sandler.
I like Jim Carrey.
I like Jim
Dumb
Carrey.
and Dumber?
Yeah, that's so
good.
funny. So dumb.
Jesus Christ! All right, I'm talking to the wrong group. You guys, this is over. We're out.
We're
5 minute podcast.
We're platelets. White blood cells are gone.
Yeah.
Exactly. Good grief. Now, who else? Dave Chappelle is just unbelievably smart. I think.
Yeah,
and
he's smart.
I mean, I'm not trying to say I'm highbrow. I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to be a highbrow guy, but I think there is something appealing about, like the, whatever intellectual capacity you have to kind of feel a vibe. And it's vibe, right? It's like music. Like,
Yeah.
Music is the most personal thing in the world, right?
It can be subjective for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's art.
It's art, and
Yeah.
comedy is art too. So
Yeah.
there's no question. That's I just don't like the whole thing about and I don't mean to pick on you, Adam Sandler.
You know what? If you want to leave a comment,
right.
or share this with Adam,
destroy your career. Your freaking multi-$100 million empire is going to be destroyed
he's
because of
smart.
Ted's comments.
Yeah,
His house is one of the few that survived.
He's
That's
not-
the California fires.
Is it really?
Well,
Oh, I was
I,
gonna
I don't
say,
know that, but there are
Was
some
it painted blue?
like Grant Cardone. I just watched a thing before this. He is potentially he's running for the governor after Newsome gets out of there.
Oh,
really?
Yeah. And so he's got political ties and, Church of Scientology, and that's a whole, it's a
right.
deep, how far do you want to go down? But his house was protected. There's houses all around it that are just decimated, melted basically, and his is standing there proudly. And he's now politically connected and might be a soon-to-be governor.
Grant Cardone?
Grant Cardone,
The 10X guy?
The 10X.
Dude, that guy is huge on YouTube. right?
He's huge. Millions of subscribers. He's got this prototype. He's asking for money because he's only a billionaire, but he's asking for money for a bus, people to donate a bus. He's got it all graffitied and everything already. You know how you can do that.
Yeah.
And it says, let's 10X California. Grant Cardone and his big smiling, billionaire faces on there.
Oh my God. So there's this whole fire thing seemed really orchestrated, right? And that's part of what we talked about.
So I spent some time watching a little bit of just some liberal commentators on YouTube. And so it's interesting because they're really going hard in the pain of like, oh, it's global warming. Like global warming is what's caused this. And all you friggin', Republican conservative, freaks that don't believe in global warming,
right.
like you guys are idiots. And then he had some guy from NASA talk about, how the global warming is causing this, that the 10 hottest years in a row have been the last decade and
Right.
blah, blah, blah.
Did the guy from NASA just come out of the Photoshop booth? Right? He was showing a
making the
picture
Earth
of
round, and then he's like, "Oh, yeah, let me answer this question about global warming."
like that lunar landing thing. That was good, dude. To see.
That is like so fake.
Oh my goodness!
Did you guys see that Apple movie, Fly Me to the Moon?
No.
Oh, it's good. It talks all about that. That's why I'm like, they must have faked the moon landing because now they're like putting out programming that talks about it.
Right.
So there's like two big movies that were made over the past like 5 years. One was about like Stanley Kubrick and how these guys. No, it was like faking the moon landing, and they had to get Stanley to like make the film and stuff. And it's a whole movie about it. Like it's a kind of a joke. It's like kind of a comedy. But then this new one that came out with Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum guy,
Right.
and it's a whole thing of where they needed a PR person to come and just in case they didn't make it to the moon, they'd film a whole thing because there was just too much riding on it. And so then they put a whole thing together, but they really made it to the moon, but they had this as a B. This was like a fictional story. I'm like, that sounds like you just told the story of what actually happened.
You see, there's no way to ever. They have so many distractions out there. How will we ever know the truth about any of it?
True.
Right?
We
It's just we will never know, man. But then the whole train line, the high-speed train thing, and like they're trying to do another land grab there too.
If you overlay the maps, it's just incredible. I mean, where the proposed high-speed rail is for LA Smart City 2028, I think they're calling it. The big agenda is 2030.
How convenient. This all burned down, and now we have to build a new city. Might as well.
And it's okay because these people all just suddenly evacuated their property because State Farm, 70% of the State Farm policies in the Pacific Palisades area were just denied 7 months ago. Strange.
And the Hawaii thing was kind of like same thing.
The Australian
huge land grab. Yeah, huge land grab. And the thing about it is, at this point, I think they're thinking they don't even have to apologize for it because once they're
not even trying to hide it anymore, dude.
Once they get their meat hooks on the land, it's over. It's
Yeah.
checkmate.
And what
right?
power do you have?
What,
you know?
And that's the whole point. Is I think
Crazy conspiracy theories.
it's crazy conspiracy theories. My buddy Jason, who I keep wanting to have on here, is running for governor. Right?
Okay. So he can't come on the show
for the second time. Well, he would, but he's just like he changes his mind. Jason, I apologize. You take some heed right now because this might help you. But like his direction will change pretty frequently. So
he's willing to think.
He's willing to think, but it's not that intentional. But my point with him is like if you go fight them on their territory, you're never going to beat them. You're fighting their game, and you can't win in their game. And this is the hardest thing about, because you and I kind of debate this, right? You can't win. The Republican-Democrat thing is the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just polar. It's two sides of the same coin. All those, boring.
Yeah. But once you get off the treadmill, then you start to realize, wow, there's power here. We don't have what's the term? Critical mass.
Yeah.
Because nobody believes this, and that's why this programming stuff is a perfect way for them to keep us in our weak spot, because all of us are too busy watching Adam Sandler. All of us are too busy.
It's true. It's true. And once I realized that your voting registration itself, it started with why follow the money, right? If you follow the money or you follow the power, you can always find the motivation for stuff here in the matrix, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the only reason why they don't care about the money, sometimes they have so much that it's irrelevant. So then it's power, right? But I started realizing, like, why do I get all these advertisements leading up to an election and during an election? They're like, get out and vote. Why do they give me a sticker? That has to cost somebody something to give me a little sticker that says, I voted.
I'm so proud.
Right. I'm proud of me. Yay. Pat me on the back as I go by because I voted. Who follow the money? It doesn't make any sense. I don't know anybody that's getting rich off that. And then, so I looked into it more and more and more, like I do everything, and found out that your voting registration itself says, I love the system as it is. I love that you steal up to 50% of my income, which is the definition of theft. And
the definition of slavery too, by the way. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Plundering. We talked about this in the last show.
Yeah. Sorry, we're repeating ourselves.
No, not really. I mean, I think this is valuable, but it just goes back to the whole thing of like, just that plundering, society.
But we're talking about agendas, and that's to me a big one. And to the point though, that the Democrat, Republican, blue, blue, red, and blue hair, and being confused about whether you're gay or it's better if you're gay now than if you're straight. I think, I don't know, but
depending on who you are.
Well, I mean, for the agenda,
for you, John.
Well, don't tell Artemis. But no, I mean there clearly is an agenda, right? And I think you break the code when you just don't vote, or you pull out of the game completely.
Well, you pull out of the game completely to just first of all say what you're saying, like follow the money. Like if I can get my head up out of these clouds or where get us above what this whole thing looks like, that's a starting place. How do I get to be as objective as I can possibly be about this without worrying about if I'm going to lose my job? Because that's the number one hook they fuck with you over is I'm going to lose my job. That's part of what being here yesterday was a little bit of it's just a recognition. I got to really bite my tongue about what because everybody's worried about. And it wasn't just that, because I had a blowout with my buddy Seth, my partner, yesterday. He's like, dude, if you're going to talk about this stuff, you got to go back to work for a different mortgage company. And I'm like, dude, this is exactly why we're struggling with having conversations, because if you're taking that path, we'll get into that later. Let me dive back into that later, because that's kind of where I wanted to go today, because it was really striking. I got legitimately upset with him about this subject, and it upsets me regularly when this comes up, because it to me is our biggest problem with why we're stuck where we're at. All these people think that Donald Trump being elected president is going to change things. All the people on the Republican, right, conservative, whatever you want to identify yourself.
Look at his cabinet picks. It's not going to change a whole lot.
It's not going to change a whole lot. I mean, it's going to change a little bit about what it looked like, and they might be a little bit more honest about their oligarchy system because it's an oligarchy system.
Right.
But it was before too.
Yeah.
They just were trying to hide it. They were lying about it. So we have a little less outward deceit in this thing, which feels a little bit better.
Oh man, but I had a great conversation with somebody the other day about Elon Musk and how he's most likely a CIA plant. And if you think about how much power he has and that, like, he superseded the government by starting his own rocket, agency, and now he can go up and he's putting thousands, tens of hundreds of thousands of these Starlink things all over the world. Like, the government would have so much red tape in order to do that, but if you get your guy to do it, then it's like no red tape and no voting on anything and whatever. It's just like, let the guy do that. Now they're surveilling the world and
Right.
it's like,
Capitalism, baby.
Right. Capitalism, democracy, the democracy term, even Tucker Carlson, I love you. And again, I'm not trying to destroy your empire with my
Ted's coming
words.
for you.
But Tucker, even you are using that term democracy, and we all
It's
know
so overplayed.
It's-
It's like, especially especially on the Democrat side, it's like they were like, we need to stand up for democracy, fight for justice. Like they were, the programming of the democracy made me start to think like, I think there's something up here with this whole democracy word, because like they're like both sides are using it like to try to manipulate us. Like there's a pattern here of like the democracy word. So I think there's something up with it.
there's definitely something up with it. And that video that you sent this morning about
the psyops.
the psyops,
Yeah, that was a good one, huh?
that's a great one.
yeah.
And that's just a playbook, and all the smart people know that playbook. But one of the things about democracy is everybody who's smart knows democracy is just the precursor to communism, right? Democracy is not a good thing. It's lowest common denominator. We in this country designed a republic, right? A constitutional republic, specifically because they knew 80% of the masses are ignorant, and like everybody knows that.
Generous.
It's generous, right? It's very generous. You can't reduce it to that, but they want us to reduce to that because they who orchestrate all these feelings are in control of those masses.
Right. And if they say, sorry, Mark.
No, you got it.
If they say words like democracy, I mean, they need the illusion that we're free.
Yeah.
They need us to feel like we're free.
Yeah.
And we're calling our own shots,
Yeah.
And we're not. And it was a republic. Don't you think I don't know if you want to go here, but Amendment 14 that made it a democracy.
It made it a democracy or whatever. Yeah, no, and
It's not a democracy now, but
it's not. I don't even know what it is now. It's a corporation. We don't want to go into that territory. It's just mind-boggling, right? We'd have to really orchestrate like a whole bunch of training video. But what I want to keep it a little more simple, and I don't know about you guys. I think you touched on something that's really important that I want to talk about, which is like whether like the debate about God. Like there's a lot of atheists out in our world, in our realm. I watched one guy today who's like runs some really big podcast, secular or something or other, and he's pretty smart. And he's
Sam
talking about
Harris?
some stuff. No, it's not Sam Harris. That's an interesting character though, isn't he? But the God debate, right? We can all debate whether there's a God, and that's a hotly debated topic for sure. But what we can't debate is that we have free will, right? Whether God gave it to us or whether the universe, whatever your thing is, nobody can deny the fact that we as human beings have free will. And my point about this fifth generation warfare, right? Which is, do you guys, is that term familiar?
I know 5D and I know warfare that's not with guns and stuff.
It's warfare. That's what it is. It's like warfare that's not with guns. They don't have to shackle us. They do psyops, right? This is what
men
they
are
call,
idiots, and
they're making us be idiots. They don't have to shackle us anymore because they have that and a corrupt money system to execute it. So those two things are how they can get us to consensually give up our free will.
Yeah, because
right?
that's the thing is we have to give it to them.
That's the thing, and it takes them off the hook for a legal concept known as fraud, and fraud is punishable by God and by governments and by most commonly known legal systems. So it takes them off the hook from fraud. They don't.
I mean, it's like, oh, they gave it to us.
They
We asked and we didn't take it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the key to fifth generation warfare. And so my point is, though, that like anybody who knows that, and that's why the CEO got whacked, because in your brainstem, we know that that's evil. The deception part of it is evil, right? Even if they think that they're like, oh, they consented, and even though we deceived the shit out of them to do it, everybody else is starting to realize this is evil doing that's happening here. And that's kind of part of what I wanted to touch on, and like where you guys think that stands, or the free will thing. What are your thoughts about that, you guys?
It's a tough one because in the Christian realm, there's Calvinists, which believe that that we kind of don't have a free will in some sense.
Really?
That, like, God pre-chose and predestined everything. So at that point, there's people who are kind of in and people who are out. And since that was all predestined, if you're out, you're out. And if you're in, you're in, you know? And so then that would make me believe that, okay, so then there is no free will in some ways, you know? But, you know, on the other hand of things, it's like, how God created us as humans, right? And so that we could be in communion with him and that we could love him. And in order for it to be authentic and true, we have to have free will to choose, right? Because you could take your girlfriend and lock her in the basement and be like, you will love me.
Right.
And it's like,
It's not love.
it's not love,
Right.
right? And then we would know that at a level of like, I have control over you, but I can't make you love me. It has to come out of your own, you know, volition and your own choice. And so in that same way, then I feel like in order to have that pure love be received, you have to have free will.
You have to have free will. And I know that you don't think like the Calvinists do at all.
Oh,
right?
no. Not, yeah.
That we all have free will. Like everybody on planet Earth has.
Right.
I think you and I have spoken.
Well, that's
about
what makes this place so wonderful.
Right.
I think the fact that we could choose a demonic existence or whatever we choose, or a godly or, you know, don't even use those terms. We have unlimited choice all the time. Is it time to cut to John's God story? The basic John God story. Have I told this before?
No, I don't think so.
I've never heard of it.
And I don't know. It might lead to something. It might be like, whatever, dude. But my mom was, I would say, a tortured, devout atheist. Okay. And I took that on. My mom was my God for the first, and it was weird. We went to a Unitarian, which is a hyper intellectual.
That's crazy, especially for someone at your age. Like, that must have been a real counterculture back then.
Yeah. Counter lots of stuff. But
Was your mom a hippie?
no, she was just she believed the whole she's very academic, extremely smart, you know, genius IQ.
Okay.
And so, but believed all the agendas. And I think her tortured emotional state was because of her childhood, like a lot of people, right? But she couldn't reconcile evidence that she found that didn't fit in the academic, like to bring it up to today, if she were alive today. She died in 2001, but to bring it up today, like she would look at global warming and she would see that there's some changes that are man-made, but basically it's a farce to create an agenda to get this green agenda, to get the smart cities going and blah, blah, blah. You know, they are not dumb and they're very patient, right? Mm-hmm. Those are qualities, and they're spiritual. They're deeply spiritual. But she was tortured by the unreconcilability of what she saw and her belief system, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I took that on and I went back to school at 30 years old to get an engineering degree. I think I graduated with a BS in environmental engineering with the most credits of anybody ever. I probably had enough to get a doctorate, you know, enough credit hours.
That's a lot of BS.
Yeah, it is.
That's exactly what it amounted to, right?
I had to defend a thesis to just get a BS. I'm like, environmental engineering should not have a 4-year degree. It should be master's at least, right? But so I took on the atheist kind of thing. Like I wasn't a devout, tortured atheist like she was, but I just didn't believe, right, in something outside of me until I was 30. And I took this world religions class by this really cool philosophy professor who like would solo climb, which means no ropes, no protection at all. Like these underclings, you know, these more than vertical faces, and just incredible. And he was very Zen. I mean, you just knew the guy was like one of those, you know, lizards sticking to the wall. You knew he wasn't going to fall, you know, because he had zero fear and just total Zen. But anyway, so this world religions class, he said, I don't remember what the time frame is, 15, 16, 1700s, right? But all the great science was the big deal then. Science was the God, right? So it was after, I'm not that great at history, but so they had this big convention where all the great minds, all the intellectual giants of the time are going to speak. And they got together and they one by one presented their argument. It's an all-day thing. Kierkegaard is a philosopher and a Prussian priest at the time. And he gets up after the predominant theory at the time to prove the existence of God is God's the first mover. You see a tree branch move. Well, what moved the tree branch? Wind. Well, what moved the wind? Well, see all these clouds, you know, storm cells, low pressure, high pressure, blah, blah. Well, what moved that? Well, God's the first mover, right? You keep backing it up. God's the first mover. So Kierkegaard gets up after they make all these presentations. And he says, you guys are all brilliant and you're completely full of shit. And he takes a big thing of chalk, a little thing of chalk actually on a big ass blackboard, and he puts a dot on the chalkboard. And he goes, that's you. See that little tiny white dot? That is you. How in the hell are you going to disprove or prove? See the chalkboard? That's universe. That's God. That's all there is. That's everything that there is. You are that white dot. You are confined to that white dot. How are you going to prove or disprove the chalkboard from your limitations of your perception?
Yeah.
Get over it. You either take a leap of faith or you don't. Jesus told us, blah, 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 you know?
And that's part of what I was alluding to the other day when we're debating stuff, like all these guys that, you know, they're trying to prove. I'm like, why are we trying so hard to prove this? I mean, we don't know. You just, a faith thing. You can't prove it. We're going to sit here and waste our breath.
You can know it in your heart.
You can know it in your heart, and you can even talk to people about it. But this effort to try so hard to prove it, to me, seems kind of like what he was.
I think it's part of the program, dude. It's all, I mean, the school system was created by the Rockefeller Foundation to create slaves. It wasn't to create entrepreneurial endeavors that could improve life. It was to create slaves because why do you think they don't teach kids anything relevant? Like how to do a relationship well, how to balance your checkbook. No, they teach you how to do a quadratic equation. Who gives a fuck? I mean, there's a couple people that need to do a quadratic equation. They need to build the bridges.
No,
Other than that, we need to drive over them with our wives and know how to treat our wives and be white blood cells for our wives and our family and know how to protect and know how to manage our money and stuff. They don't teach any of that.
They don't teach any of that. And they do teach us how to be distracted from all of that. And that's part of where I'm going with the television stuff, the television programming, the comedy stuff, all that stuff, is they know how to distract us from it really, really well.
Yeah.
And this book, Wild at Heart, dude, thank you for referring me to this book, because this book is so good about defining what masculinity, redefining it in terms that I hadn't been understanding my whole life, right? Because our whole life, that's part of what, ever since I was born in 1970. So ever since I was born, I've been getting this programming that teaches you that basically as a guy, you're either a dummy or you're bad.
Right.
And this book has kind of reconnected with the idea that, no, you have a purpose and God gave you a purpose. And even if you don't want to call it God, whatever you want to call it, you have a purpose that isn't, well, he talks about a lot of things and references the Bible, which I think are really, really important things. Whether or not you're a believer, I think they're just important things because that book has been on this planet for 2,000 years, and a lot of people refer to it.
Longer than that, but yeah.
Well, longer than that. Yeah, much longer than that, right? For lots of parts of
the
it.
Old Testament.
The Old Testament, which is much older than that, right? Thank you for clarifying that. But it's the most referenced book in all of human history, right?
Yeah.
And it's not because it's full of shit. It's because there's some really tangible, valuable information in that book. and that should open our eyes to a lot of things. And one of the things that you can take away from that book that's in this book is that God wasn't a feminist. Can anybody,
You trying to get canceled?
Does anybody dispute that? I mean, that's the thing. Well, and the whole toxic masculinity thing is a massive false flag. That's where the white blood cells thing, that's where I'm really motivated to push this thing toward, because our legs have been pulled out from underneath us. Our feet have been pulled out from underneath us. And we need to recognize that first and foremost, that this distraction stuff is just that. If you look at your true nature, and most guys, I think, really know this in their hearts, they're just like, why is there all this cognitive dissonance in my mind? Why is there this massive conflict? And part of, like, you can see these guys jumping out and recognizing it. I think Bill Burr is a guy who's like poking at that constantly, and lots of other characters are too. I think it's becoming more and more prominent and prevalent. But that's the place that I really want to spend time understanding. There's a couple pages out of this thing that I want to read eventually too, but on air. But yeah, that's the part that really troubles me, and it drives me nuts like when guys. I got a good friend of mine who identifies himself as a feminist, which, dude, how it seems just baffling and crazy how you could become that hooked on something that is
He's
totally
just trying
false.
to get laid.
Well, he
I'm a feminist. Yeah, really.
I mean, look, he's not going to get laid by me. Like, why admit it to me? He's not gay. He didn't say he's gay. He just said he's a feminist. So yeah, no, but you're probably right. He probably is, in this desperate, because maybe it's desperation that causes the,
Yeah, whenever I saw, dude, there's this one guy at the gym that wore a Harris shirt.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is the most demasculating.
It totally is.
Like, I know who you are, and I've never even talked to you,
right.
And it's like, I just see him there, and I'm just like, this guy.
Well, my reaction to the whole I was born in 1961, so the whole, my reaction to this agenda that we talked about the whole time, the demasculation of men, the anti-red blood cell, the plasma. Right?
Is that what we're calling it? I don't even know. We're going to come up with another.
No, not cancer. We don't want to go there. That's mixing agendas.
Yeah.
But was to try to feminize myself, to try to get in touch with, and I didn't even realize this was happening until I got really angry and really pissed off like a couple decades ago about why do I not feel able to be a man? And I knew it was a John thing. It wasn't a society thing. Yes, it had got programmed in and everything, but I was pissed off that I felt like I couldn't be masculine.
What was your dad like?
My mom was definitely the alpha, the boss in the house. And my dad was kind of, he was a man's man in a way, but in that relationship, what I saw was him just kowtowing to her constantly because she's going to make the most noise if things go bad. She's going to do the silent treatment for 3 days or start throwing pots and pans around the house or whatever, She was bipolar. And so he really just, and I think it came from a good place. Like he's just trying to keep peace in the family, and he knows he's going to be okay no matter what happens. He knows that she's not. But it was I think he got pretty feminized by her. And so I didn't have a good role model, but I took all the agenda and I kind of tried to neuter myself almost. I didn't even realize I was doing that. And I just wonder how many people, because I go around thinking I'm all unique and special and everything, and then I find out, yeah, just like everybody else, So I wondered how many millions of men had that reaction to that back in the day, to the agenda, and even now. Yeah. Because it's clearly bad to be a man, as defined by Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, to be a man's man.
I watched a John Wayne movie a couple months ago too. It's weird to watch that because I don't even think that's masculinity. I think it was really, I'd never really watched it and paid attention to. He was kind of a pouter. He was trying to get this chick, you know, like he's
Which
total.
movie was this?
It was one where he's in Hawaii. I can't remember which.
John Wayne was in Hawaii?
He was in the military, of course, but he's in
flag. Oh,
Hawaii.
okay.
You know,
Just like,
it wasn't.
oh, it's Boogie Boarding Wednesday.
It wasn't Elvis. Elvis did tons of movies in Hawaii. I think no, it wasn't Elvis, but same thing. Like he was kind of a powder, which is really weird because he was like this tough guy, but he was like if it's kind of what you describe about your mom, like. You know, I think that's a common kind of iteration. If you don't get what you want, well, then you're going to be a passive aggressive and you're going to pout. But it was weird to see John Wayne doing that.
Right, yeah.
When you think, oh, this is a man's man, he's going to like toe the line no matter what. Well, he's kind of a powder. And I don't know if that was unique to that movie or if that was maybe something that was kind of common to that era. I think it was kind of common to that era because I'd seen my grandfather kind of act the same way. He was a total man's man.
But think about this. Like, if you think about, right, so we have this programming of, you know, weak, pathetic, just wishy-washy, you know, lack of confidence men, right, through sitcoms and kind of like this daily programming, right? And then what are the movies that we gravitate towards? To Rambo, Gladiator,
second one's so
Terminator,
Yeah,
you know, like the Commando,
Braveheart.
like these, like so it's like it resonates with our souls. Like we want to watch these action superheroes of, you know, Stallone in the forest, like, you know, taking on an entire, you know, SWAT team. Yeah. This guy,
he had.
look at his watch, like, hey man,
is this over yet? No, but the sports thing, Jason Christoff says that's what sports is about, too, right?
Totally, it's false masculinity, right?
Totally false.
That's his point. It takes the real masculine offline.
We get our
it's got
endorphins and our everything's cranking as we're watching.
You're just watching it. You're not doing anything.
They provide it, so we don't. So we're satiated. We don't give it to our family like we should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if we're, you know, Jesus focused or biblically focused, we give it. Well, we love God first, and then that trickles to everything.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah, I would say so. I started this. I took on this challenge to read the Bible in 90 days, and the positive thing that I see, you know, I think there's an element of where I'm really not studying the Bible or like meditating on it, but what it's doing is that it's taking up all the extra time that I had in the day to like watch YouTube or whatever. And I'm having to like, because if I miss, then I'm like screwed. Like if I miss, you know, there's 3 times a day and it has 2 different sections of like, you got to read this part from the New Testament, this part. And so now it's like, okay, if I get behind, I'm screwed. And so it's like, every second that I have where I'd like, oh, I'd get on my phone and like, you know, scroll through something and say, oh, I got to stay on top or else I'm going to fall behind because I'm going to complete this in 90 days. And so, but with that, what I would say already, because I started that January 1, you know, already like 2 weeks into the new year, I've already seen how it's like, my mind is like changing, like the things that like worry or fear or some other things that could creep in, like, it's like there's no space for that.
Right.
Know?
Right.
And
well,
so it's been fascinating.
And if you're watching a thing on YouTube, unless you're really deliberate about what you're watching, you're getting programmed with subtle messages of fear and anxiety, and you should worry because that's going to help, right? But when you're doing the other programming, it's powerful. And the subconscious mind, you know, I'm a freedom from self-sabotage coach, and that's all about Jason that you mentioned. And talking about how the subconscious mind works, which controls 95 to 97% of our behavior. And the way it works and learns is through repetition. So you got to be vigilant. I love that. I love that you're doing that. And there's no doubt you can be a believer. To me, that's even secondary, you know, believer or not. It's look at any manuscript that has survived for 2,000 years. That thing is protected. You don't even have to get religious or spiritual about it, but that thing is energetically protected, or else it just goes away. You know, I mean, there's truth in it. You don't have to believe any of it. But you know there's truth in it because it's survived for way over 2,000 years.
Well, what's cool about you bringing that up, I didn't even look at it from that vantage point of you just occupying your time. That's like, I didn't think about it all from that perspective, but I did talk to my buddy about this, Jason, the governor guy. He loves MMA. Like he loves to work out and do MMA because he gets to expend energy. And he and I talked about this just yesterday too, about that's a great out, like any guy or
Are we joining
person.
a jiu-jitsu club
What-
together?
dude,
I would love it.
I'm down.
I'm
We
not
can throw
down.
bro.
I'm not
Let's
down,
go.
dude.
We
I'm
can,
not,
you know,
my
That
back.
ought to be
grapple a
so
little
sick.
bit.
I would love it.
Yeah, let's roll, baby.
I thought I could do it, dude. It's not. I have no advantage despite my height. Believe me, I would fold up like a cheap.
Of course, your
suit.
nuts are just right there. I mean,
That's true.
He's got
there's-
bad knees.
that's
too.
the
It's
one.
Like, you know.
I'm not doing it. I tested it once. I'm done. If you want to meet me on the pickleball court, I'll be down.
you know, I sparred once with my 2nd degree black belt Taekwondo son, who's now 22. I sparred with him once.
Right.
Because he was going easy on the old man, let me think that I had some
Oh, dude, those guys are so.
and everything. And then I went to throw, so I can't even remember, but he went like, boom. I went, okay, we're done.
Well,
Yeah.
it's good. Where I was going with it is like there's a real like Jason has learned a real stoicism kind of philosophy from that. So I think there's that, but just the. I was going to an even more basic place. Like I like to cut the grass. I don't know about you guys. I love cutting my grass because it's a mindless activity that at the end I'm always proud of what I had done. I do the same thing. I clean up my own house. I've never hired a maid, nor would I hire a maid to clean my house. The physical activity that I get out of cleaning my house and kind of taking inventory on the house, like all the things that are happening there. Plus, when I'm done, it's the most proud feeling that I have too. I don't like, so there's something, it's similar to this, like your mind is on something that's not like YouTube or some, nefarious influence. But it's like also a physical activity. Reading is a mental activity too that occupies your mind in a really healthy, good way. But I think that physical activity is a necessary thing that we have to have in our lives too. So that's another thing that I like to keep in the daily activity list. But the reading thing for sure, like there's a lot of audiobooks. Do you guys do audiobooks?
Oh, I love audiobooks. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
But you don't do the Bible on audio, right?
Well, it depends because
Really?
trying to keep up on this, it's like I if I'm like, okay, I'm driving, let me, instead of listening to music or a podcast, like let me just listen to scripture because I need to get through the whole Bible in 90 days. So
You got to bang that.
7 days a week.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
It's a serious commitment, dude. Yeah.
But it'll be good. I think, I'm excited. Like when it's done, I'll be like, dang, that's cool.
Well,
I'll
yeah,
start
just
over.
just like mowing the lawn, you did something.
Yeah, exactly. I'll look back and then I'll, they have year programs where like, it's like, oh, they map it out so that you can read the whole Bible in a year. And
Right.
maybe I'll do that next, like,
Yeah.
some more
But your
physical.
physical aspect, that's a big deal too. Moving your body, whether it's working out or
I think it's important
jiu-jitsu
for
or-
guys too,
Oh, especially.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with my son. When he was in like 7th grade, I caught him looking at naked girls on the internet, and I said, "Dude," I was like I get it, but this is really unhealthy for your brain, and it creates a false reality of what like a healthy, loving sexual relationship should be. Like it turns women into objects, and not a physical person. And I said, when you start to feel these like feelings, because you're wired, like sex is a good thing. Like God designed sex, and like we're wired to like have that in our lives, but in the right context, And so I was like, when you start feeling these things, try to divert your energy to something like, he plays the drums. So I'm like, why don't you practice drumming? Like get on the drums or like lift weights, like, take that energy and focus it on something else. And then within that, I'll notice that you're like growing in these certain areas,
Right.
It's like, hey, instead of me wasting time like doing this, it's like I'm actually like developing my body or my brain.
How
or
old is
whatever it
he?
He's gonna be 17 here soon.
So do you ever tell him like go out and execute on like not have sex, but like to work on the practice of getting to have sex? Like I know premarital sex is probably pretty taboo in certain family households, but the prospect of seeking out partners is a pretty like it's an art form as well, right?
Yeah, I think so. I know we're a little bit different. And you probably got into like the alpha male group, where it's like how to pick up chicks, like, back in the early 2000s.
I wish I had. No, I would. No, that's that. There can be some dark behavior. I'm not talking about that, but I am talking about.
We try to encourage him to, like, you need to learn how to communicate and operate around the opposite sex, you know?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, he's had some girlfriends and he's had like 2 or 3 girlfriends that, that have come over to the house, we've met and things like that. But I think at that age too, I want to try to teach him, because my dad was never like, I never learned anything manly. And I'm definitely, I would say, I always felt like very metro, it's like, I'm not gay, but I like to cook. I have a high voice. I like fashion. Like, there's all these things. Like when I was in high school, I was like, I think I want to do cosmetology school. And it's like, fag,
Right.
But I was like, I don't know what that is. I was never modeled like masculine, because my dad, I would say, is a little bit effeminate in some ways, where he's not like a man's man. And again, I think because his dad was very abusive to him, and his dad was just very just treated him poorly and humiliated him and made him feel less. And so I think that kind of translated into him cowering or not feeling
well, I think humiliation is just so toxic to men. I mean, men need to be trusted in any relationship, but especially I think with other men. And so if he was humiliated, that's got to be, I mean, that could just
That's the MO amongst guys, is because of our competitive nature, we attempt to humiliate each other too. Maybe even not in necessarily like a really sinister way, but like it's just this kind of like, every guy that I buddies with, we're constantly cutting each other. There's no actually genuine support from each other, which is, that's another thing that I'm writing about in one of the chapters, because I think that's really, really, like you said, I mean, guys are constantly seeking, this book talks about it too, constantly seeking out trust. The first person we're seeking it out from, or validation rather, is our dad. And most dads don't ever, like every guy that I talk to is like us, their dads didn't give them any validation, let alone training.
I kind of stayed out of the way of my 3 boys. The youngest is 16 now. But I had it on the calendar or an agenda item, whatever, to teach him how to change a tire. Everybody should know at least how to change a tire.
And
for
oil.
Christ's sake.
It's harder nowadays with oil, but...
but at least a tire, right?
You got to, it's a kind of an urgent situation if you blow the tire on a highway, right?
Right. Yeah, so just this last summer, we went up there, the 3 boys and girlfriend went up there, and I said, Sam, we're doing it. And I was just like, okay, I'm on a mission from God right now, And so, dude, I just saw a part of him. I'm going to try not to get emotional, but I saw a part of him come alive, and he was just like, fuck yeah, Dad's teaching me how to change a tire. And I mean, when he lowered the jack, and I could see what was going on, man. It was moving as shit. And I was just staying out of the way. I'm like, let him figure it out. Let him figure it out. Don't say it. Don't say a word. Shut up. And he figured it out. And he was letting that thing down, man. And he was like, are we going to go race this thing now? What are we doing? Right. It was so cool, but I don't think we get a lot of that because, we're trying to make everything so damn convenient. I love that you actually clean your house. I mean, I'm the guy that wants to get the maid, but I love that you do that if it's like a meditation for you.
It's a total and everybody has their different thing, because some guys like your son might just be totally mechanically oriented, and that might have really struck a chord with him.
I like to cook.
You like to cook, and that might be, but like going out and seeking out females is, dude, that's like a pretty important thing. It's like what we talked about. Nobody taught me that. Nobody ever taught me that. Nobody, like my dad. I don't know. That's
this is what I would argue with you about this.
Yeah.
Like, because what I would say is that, because I've had some friends. I had a buddy once who was very obsessed with this. Like trying to like figure out how to pick up chicks and like, really just the psychology behind it. And, he was like really into this thing. And then one of the thoughts that I had, when he was talking about stuff and he was getting like online coaching from, like it was just like a thing. And I was like, dude, imagine though, if you were the best version of yourself, right? If you were healthy, if you were fit, if you took care of yourself, if you were confident, if you were articulate and you knew about things, I don't think you'd have to go out and get women. I think that you could just interact with women and they would instantly know, like,
You're like one of those
this
fly
is
strips.
a guy. Yeah, like this is a man and I want to be with him.
Right.
If you were confident. And
But that's what I'm saying. Like,
That's your best self. Yeah.
yeah, it's like I think you can train a young man to be a best version of himself, and then the women will come.
To basically honor himself. Like, and it's the whole in versus out, right? Do you go outside of you to try to perform correctly for the woman? Or do you work on yourself? That's white blood cells in a
It is.
nutshell,
You're right. And that's my point is, like, it's not necessarily like I'm not teaching my stepson, for example. I try to teach him the same kind of idea about how to be confident enough to attract a woman, because you're totally right. It's totally about your confidence. But most guys, like, I only had brothers growing up, so I knew nothing about women. And so I finally read a book that kind of, he's like, gave me the counterpoint. He's like, look, the first thing you got to understand about women is the first thing that they're worried about is their safety.
Mm-hmm.
They're worried about you killing them or raping them. I know that sounds weird, but like guys take it for granted. We're not getting raped, and rarely are we getting killed. Right? Unless we're in prison. So
then you have to worry about both.
We got to worry about both. Right.
And then as soon as they're okay and they realize they're not going to get killed or raped by you, they want to get killed and raped by you. They're not killed, but they do want to get raped by you.
All right, we're getting way too deep. This went to S&M. We're not going to S&M. S&M, John. God damn it!
What time is it?
No, go back to my point. So that had never struck my mind before. That girls are worried about: is this guy creep? If he puts off a creepy vibe, he might take me to his basement and rape or kill me. So that. I had never thought about that before. So that's the first thing women are thinking about. And so just these basic psychology things that help you understand somebody else's point of view, but then also helps you build this sense of confidence about, like, I'm going to get rejected a lot as a guy seeking out girls. Girls don't seek out guys in a normal world. People, we're not talking about a feminist world.
Right.
Women are not structured to go seek out guys. It doesn't work that way. The girl is the flower and we are the bees and we're going to go chase them. That's the natural world. So we're going to get rejected in that world. And you can't let that kill your confidence. So that was part of this book that I'm referring to, part of what helping me understand all those psychological things, which frankly, it's not just about seeking out women. It's about sales work. It's about promoting yourself. It's about all these other things that as a man are really, really important about making speeches. You got to build confidence. And that confidence thing, dude, I'm 54 years old. I just learned some of this stuff in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Why didn't somebody, like, why aren't we teaching our kids that at like 9, 10? You probably are, because you've like,
yeah, and even for me, it's like one of those things where I think I'm self-aware of it enough where I'm like, man, I want better for my kids, than what I had. And even though I'm not even, I would say, as competent or as fluent in these things, I'm like, I know that they're good though, and so it's like, how do I instill that into them now?
Yeah.
So confidence is so central, what we're saying. So how do you create it as a man?
I think
is what you said.
Well, there's no magic answer to it. I think it's all these repetitive things, but I think having a connection to like morality and philosophy, like you have to have some connection to a really thoughtful process. And the reason I said you probably do with your kids is because you, like, I don't know how you had this, but I think at a pretty early age, you've had this recognition of psychology, right? By seeing maybe your mom and going through that whole episode with your mom and seeing that.
We'll do my mother's story
another day.
Yeah.
But it's an extreme psychological kind of situation that you're getting exposure to and recognizing, wow, this is crazy. And so like maybe that's what helped you see how that part of yourself or that part of a person can be so impactful on life, and to step away from that. I don't know, like it's really commendable that you were able to do that, man, because I think most people would want to become victimized by that
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
feel sorry
absolutely.
for themselves.
Yeah.
And you did not take that path. And that's, I think, part of what has gotten you to the place, and that was God's plan for you, or whatever you want
Yeah.
to call it. But that it gives you a huge leg up, and I'm sure your
Yeah.
kids have a huge leg up because of it.
Well,
Most people,
he's modeling it. And what I learned from 3 kids is that it doesn't matter at all what you say.
Right.
They watch what you're doing.
Yeah.
And what I was alluding to by what he said in its relation to confidence, how you build confidence, is Mark's advice to his friend that was learning how to pick up chicks and all that is go be your best self. And then you don't have to worry about that. Then you can write that damn book. You know, you can be the creator of it instead of the follower of it.
Yeah.
And instead of chasing, you're attracting. And I think that's how, from my experience, and I'm learning shit too, and I'm 63, you know, and it's, I think it's going and being your best self is how you get confident.
And what is being your best self? I think that's another thing as far as like, so I think that's part of it. Like, okay, so how did then we start thinking about the things, the systems, the processes, the behaviors that lead to our best selves? Because I think when we start doing that, then that confidence gets developed, right? Like, when you're as a man, you know, it's like I go to the gym so I can maintain my fatness. Like I'm not trying to like be super healthy, but I want to eat whatever I want to eat, and so I go to the gym. But we lift and stuff like that, and so I have a certain amount of strength, right? And I can size somebody up and be like, I'm confident that I could take that person, you know, like, and so I think if you build that kind of confidence, whether that's with your the philosophy or your brain, or like how you studying, like how you can articulate things, you know, physically, like I have an endurance, I can at least run a mile, and I can lift this much. It's like you have this kind of confidence because you know what you're capable of.
Well, and both of you said the answer too. I think you're absolutely right. But both of you said the answer before. The way I heard it was like you go do that stuff, and you're doing your Bible in 90 days, and you're noticing. You said your brain has changed in 2 weeks. And you say when you clean the house, instead of, you know, doing something that wouldn't be as wasteful, you feel amazing. So I think it's protocols like to do the Bible in 90 days or whatever, you know, and doing that. But I think it's also present moment to moment awareness. Like if you check in with yourself, and that there's multiple benefits to that, right? Including healing. But if you check in with yourself constantly and you're just like, how do I feel? I mean, if I'm honest, when I'm on a death scroll, you know, I'm just scrolling through YouTube and I'm on my 45th minute. If I just stop and I go, John, and sometimes I physically go, stop, John. And sometimes I even go, God, help me, you know, throw this away. If I'm honest with myself right then, I feel like crap. And if I get up and eat an apple, or go for a walk in the sunshine, or clean up the sink that's been bothering me for 5 hours, I feel amazing.
You feel amazing.
And if I was to read a certain, you know, verse, I would feel amazing too.
And that's part of what I was going to say is it's an overall discipline. It's habituating yourself to be disciplined about certain things. And they're different for everybody what those things are. I think like physical activity, reading, thinking about things, spending time with people that you care about, and like doing these disciplined things and staying away from the distractions, staying away from fear, shame, and guilt things, which are all the addictive things if you think about it, right? All the sex addiction,
alcohol,
porn addiction, alcohol, drugs,
video
games, spending money, just all these things. All they do is cause fear, shame, and guilt. And that's the counter to confidence, right? But if you think about every company that's a thriving company in our culture, they're all selling us not discipline. They're not selling us any kind of discipline.
Right.
They're selling us addictive things, gambling, pharmaceutical drugs, which is just a shortcut to something. You know, they'd sell us hardcore drugs, food is, for sure. Alcohol all the time. But spending, they just want us to spend they're selling us on fear, shame, and guilt constantly. So it's all counter to that confidence stuff. So the first thing we got to do is we just got to, if you're going to watch TV, you're going to watch mainstream media, you just have to know these things, that they're just working on you. And the more you watch it, the more you're just going to be exposed, like you said. You got
and what yes, I agree totally. And if you make a practice of, I'm going to monitor me as I watch this,
Yeah.
I can't watch more than about 7 minutes of any show now. And it's not because I'm so wonderfully enlightened or anything, or I do much better things with my time. It's just because I'm watching what's going on. And my energy is going like this. Whereas if I go for a walk, or maybe I don't even want to call you up, honestly, sometime. But I go, Ted's a friend, and that requires a little bit of maintenance. I'm gonna call Ted. I'll feel amazing. It'll be a total state shift. I might be in a really dark place, and I make a decision that I'm proud of. First of all, to call you, to honor it, to all that stuff. I'm not just taking the easy way, because it would be really easy to hit 8-ball pool,
Yeah.
or watch a YouTube video or whatever.
Right.
Dude, thank you for saying that, because that just is every relationship requires investment and
does.
maintenance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's part of what the Terra thing, I think, like I was talking about, like I'm doing all this investment, but it's not getting returned. Like it requires mutual investment for
Right.
sure. And it is totally healthy. It's just like taking a walk. It's just like working out. And nobody's telling us to do that.
Right.
I don't know.
That doesn't sell anything.
It doesn't sell anything. You're
Yeah.
right. None of the discipline things sell anything, and that's the bummer about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe argue that in some ways they do, but then that's when you get the gurus and the people who know how to use marketing and magic words and
They're
stuff
just trying to
sell
shortcut.
things.
They're just trying to shortcut you.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Then they whisk you off to their flat Earth video or something. I mean, it's crazy.
Exactly. They're just preying on your vulnerability.
Bringing your vulnerability
Yeah.
to alternative thinking that yeah. You guys take it. I'm not.
I'm not good. I'm waiting for, I'm waiting
starting
for
to
you
say-
to read.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
I remember.
Did you have a chapter or a...
Just-
No, I just
speaking
the
of that-
chapter. No, I don't have a chapter.
Speaking of that book, though, I remember reading it, and I don't remember the content that much, but I remember feeling really empowered sometimes after reading it.
It's totally empowering, and rereading stuff. This is another thing that is totally underappreciated is rereading stuff. That's what, look, you can see all my underlines and stuff.
Awesome.
And
I
this,
love
like
that.
I tagged the dog ear stuff. Everybody's like, dude, what did you do? That's why I can't do audiobooks, because I got to do this.
Right.
Um,
I just get an audiobook as, let's see if I like this, and then
that's a good one. Yeah.
oftentimes I'm 30 minutes in and I'm ordering the paperback because I need to do that as well.
Yeah. No, just my main thing that I wanted to talk about today was like, the thing that frustrated me about talking to my buddy and him being really like gun shy about me going out and talking about really controversial things is that we have been censored to death as men to not talk about the truth stuff. And, it's like that really frustrates the crap out of me. And like he's worried about, I'm reframing this in what I think he was worried about is like compromising his client base by talking about things that are controversial. And I'm like thinking to myself, you're worried about that because you're going to possibly lose business because you don't want those people to know that you maybe have a connection to the truth. And my point is that you would rather stoop down to whatever level they're at rather than attempt to bring them up to the level that you might be at.
That's
understanding.
That's
the truth.
how unethical doctors recommend remdesivir and respirators that killed my dad. People say, "What killed your dad?" And I say, "The hospital protocol." They say, "You mean COVID?" I said, "No, I mean the fucking hospital protocol."
Right.
Because the hospital got $32,000 for that, and the doctor got something, But that's exactly the same mentality that does it. And not only that, dude, with the consciousness of the planet right now, you're probably going to gain a ton of business if you're at least open.
Because there's so much demand.
There's so many
much
people that
demand
are-
for, like, they're begging for truth.
Yeah.
They're begging for it, right? And but there's a lot of people who are totally cauterized. Their brains have been, like, cognitive dissonance is a powerful, powerful thing. Like, once your brain is so habituated to telling lies, and look, we've been telling a lot of lies for a long time. And so people are really, really gun shy. Yeah. And this whole idea that we're going to lose business over that, like, I'm not going to feed my family. That's the number one excuse that people say. How am I going to feed my family? I'm like, dude, I was thinking about this. We've been through the dark ages on this planet. We've been through a couple world wars, the Great Depression. And Obama was in office for 2 terms. We've suffered through some pretty horrible shit in this world, right? You're losing your job. Look, God, like in this country, hardly anybody genuinely goes starving. Nope. Like you stepping out and talking about truth is the only connection. Like if you lose your job, that's one thing. But if you lose your freedom and your connection to truth, that's a bigger deal. Voluntarily.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's the point why this book is so good, because I'll just read one chapter here. Courage is almost a contradiction in terms. It means a strong desire to live, taking the form of readiness to die. He that will lose his life shall save it. He that will lose his life, the same shall save it. It's not a piece of mysticism for saints and heroes. It's a piece of everyday advice for sailors or mountaineers. It might be printed in an alpine guidebook or a drill book. The paradox is the whole principle of courage, even of quite earthly or quite brutal courage. A man cut off by the sea may save his life if he will risk it on the precipice. He can only get away from death by continually stepping within an inch of it.
Isn't that why we love Braveheart? Isn't that's why we love Gladiator?
Yeah.
Because I'm dying on this fucking hill.
Yeah.
And that's the essence of manhood.
I
mean, true manhood.
Yeah, it is. And
and a few Bible verses came up to me when you were reading that. I was thinking about. So Matthew 16:23 says, "For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it."
Holy cow.
Yes.
Matthew 16:25.
That's awesome. Dude.
And then the other one that I thought too is 2 Timothy 1:7, which says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." And so, there's like this, like for me, whenever I weigh something in my life of like, should I do this or should I not do this? If ever there's fear that's driven, like I know that that's not from God. Like,
no.
God does not give us a spirit of fear and timidity.
Never.
He gives us a spirit of power and might. And so I'm like, man, if I'm feeling timid or fearful, I know that's not from the Lord. And so I go the opposite direction of that.
No, and that's something that you have to habituate yourself to too, right? Because if we get habituated to fear, well, then it's really hard to snap ourselves out of it. And I think that's where a lot of guys are. Mm-hmm. They're just stuck in this place of habituated fear. Yeah. Like, I'm going to lose my job. And somebody keeps telling me that on that idiot box. And I'm not doing what you're saying, because the truth is horrifying. I'm going to lose my job.
Yeah. Well, and again, right, it comes to that whole propaganda, like the programming thing, right, where and I will have to put the link of that video in the show notes of this episode, because it's just like that whole idea of like, man, if you were seeing something on a 24-hour news cycle, like constantly, they're trying to make you afraid, and they're trying to, manipulate you through that, right? Because there's other horrific things happening in the world right now than the California fires. You know what I'm saying? Like,
probably even in your backyard, there's probably something worse going on than that, right?
But it's like the fact that is what they're trying to push into our consciousness right now is like, okay, I'm skeptical about like what's happening, what's really going on.
And that's the thing that I think like people mistake a lot of my attitude for this negativism, right? Is because I'm always looking at things through this very skeptical lens. But I think that's another quality as a man. You're obligated to protect yourself. Mm-hmm. And because there's stuff coming at us from all different directions. Now, the better you get at it, like it's like what you said when you're watching, what's being worked at. So it's a habitual thing too. You're rehabituating yourself to understanding, this shit's coming at me. That's not negativity. It's just you got to be able to put a filter on it.
You have to be aware, because you can't be a white blood cell if you're diminished yourself. You got to be strong, and it's not just for you. It's for your family and those that you love and stuff. Exactly. And I love that fear. I mean, that goes back to being self-aware, like on a moment-to-moment basis. You can make all these big declarations and these New Year's resolutions and all that stuff, but that ain't where it's at, really. It's the moment-to-moment. Do it when you're bored. Do it when you're not resourced. And you can get to that by that understanding, that verse actually, which is if it's fear, it's not. Well, I would argue that it's two things. It's not the Lord. The fear is not the Lord, but maybe you're supposed to do it anyway to transcend fear. And that's a conversation you got to have with your highest self, if you will, or God or whatever, right? But no,
No, I think that's a good way of putting it, because like those signals, I think they're signals. When you get something that triggers that fear instinct, it's a signal. Maybe I need to change my path, or maybe I need to get up above this, right? To do what you said and recognize this isn't God talking. This isn't the truth talking. This is somebody trying to deceive me. And now I pop up out of it, but it's a signal.
Or maybe this is God giving me an opportunity to transcend a fear part of me, and that fear part of me is not of God, and God's trying to vacate that part of me that isn't God and put God in there, and I have to go through this. Like, I'm just thinking of something really simple like cold calls or something. Nobody wants to make cold calls.
Yeah.
But you do it. And how do you feel? You feel like you do after you do the Bible verse instead of scroll. You feel like you do after you clean the house instead of do something less.
It takes discipline.
It does.
Yeah. And that's rewarding. That's not a reward. It's rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what builds confidence, I think.
I think so
You
too.
know?
Yeah. You get a lot of those proud of me moments, and they don't have to be anything big. They could be, I'd rather have a Coke, but I'm going to have a water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as long as you're conscious enough. And that we don't ever get taught that either, to pat ourselves on the back. When I remember, I pat myself on the back about 20 times a day because it's my job. And that's how I develop confidence, and that's how I feel like a white blood cell for Artemis and for the boys.
Yeah.
You know? And if I don't do that, I can get kind of down a little bit, because there's a lot of programming out there to make me feel less than. Because if you can make me feel less than, then I'm going to buy your shit, right?
Right.
I'm going to drink your beer. I'm going to whatever, you know?
Well, that's the number one thing that I was struggling with for the longest time, is just beating myself up. I'd get pissed, I'd break something, and then I'd feel shame for it.
Right.
And that would just snowball, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't until like I got pointed out, you are your own worst critic, and snapping out of that and realizing, well, I got mad and I shouldn't have done that, but now I'm going to bounce back, and I'm not going to let that snowball, and to forgive myself, because I'm going to make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
But you got to be forgiving of yourself first, and you got to be forgiving of everybody else as well, because everybody is going to screw things up.
Well, and in a true white blood cell world, I think it's our obligation to know how this place really works. And I don't think there is anything such as failure. I really don't. I think there's winning and there's learning. And that's not some corny metaphysical
I
saying.
think you're totally right.
I think it's absolutely the way it is. And back to the free will, we get perception. So even if that's bullshit, it's bullshit that works.
Mm-hmm.
And it empowers us to be white blood cells. So let's use it. There is no such thing as failure. So why would you ever beat yourself up? And we're always taught that you have to check all these boxes you have to get this grade, to be worthy. No, you're worthy. How do we know? Well, here you are in the flesh.
Yeah.
God says you're worthy. The ultimate judger of worthiness says that you're worthy because you're alive. So quit worrying about qualifications and go do it.
Yeah.
Go get confident by being your best self.
That learning thing, every mistake that's when people learn the most, I think, is from their mistakes, right? That's when I've learned the most. So absolutely. And then when you start looking at it through that lens, then you're beating yourself up pretty much goes away too.
It does. And all the new age bullshit, like nobody ever started to walk, right? And they fell down, and they wanted to walk again. They fell down. They wanted to walk again. They fell down. They go, I guess I'm just not a walker.
Right.
I'm not destined to be a walker. But now that's accepted.
Yeah.
I was a little too masculine there. I better back it down.
Right.
Or I was a little feminine. Maybe I'm a woman.
Let's go cut it off. Let's go cut it off.
More likely.
Hey, how many women are becoming men in the whole transgender thing? Has anybody ever looked at those statistics?
On next episode.
I mean, not to change, come on, dude. I mean, it just came to mind. I was thinking about that. That's a hard pivot, but seriously, why would a girl want to become a guy? There's no reason, right? Guys are just, and so I'm curious. We got to look that up. I'm looking that up.
Have somebody who's a gender studies professor come on.
I'm sure there's statistics.
I can't reveal who it is in my life, but I know a girl that has become a guy, and it's hard for me to say he, but is very happy with
Really?
that decision, and
How long ago did they do this?
Still in the process, but
Yeah, exactly.
but pretty much done.
Let me call them in a decade and let's
years
see where
ago.
they're at.
No, right. But no, when she was she always felt like, and around a pitcher of beer one night we got to this, but she felt like, I mean, she was always the boss in every relationship. And she felt uncomfortable, and she was always trying to throttle herself back, like, let the man be the man, let him be the white blood cell, even though he's not. Why am I attracted to this pussy, for Christ's sakes? I got to run everything, And then she's like, well, okay, so I just, I mean, he's young, right?
Yeah.
So subjected to all this program that it's great to be confused about your gender, but is really happy with it now. So it's like, oh, okay.
I'm kind of with you, Mark, on this one. Like, let's check back in 5 or 10 years. I just don't.
Yeah.
Because I think at the core of it, for me, what I think about is that God created man and woman. There is no confusion about that. What it is that we get confused about our identities and who we are. And again, I have known some really great transgender, like nice transgender people, that I would say my heart breaks for them, because for me, it's more of like, I just think you just don't know who you are. And then in our society, you get praised and celebrated too. So then not only do we already have a society where we're feeling less than and we're feeling forgotten about, and then all of a sudden we get attention for you're so brave, or like you're being your true self, or oh, you're taking such a risk. Then it's like, oh, I feel good about that. Well, let me push more into that so I can be celebrated.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I just
it's totally counterintuitive, and it's part of the programming to work on your fear, shame, and guilt, I think, and people are vulnerable enough to take the bait, and that's usually who ends up taking the bait is the most vulnerable people, which is such a bummer. But I don't know. I don't know why I'm sorry about the tangent, because that's not where I wanted to spend a lot of time, and you guys probably didn't either. But
it's a complex issue, because again, and I think same thing with like homosexuality. I know some great people are homosexual, but I can say that I don't agree with the lifestyle, and I don't agree that it contributes positively to society, growing and moving forward. But in the same way, it's a complex issue, because if one of my kids was transgender or gay or something like that, like I don't know how I would process that, or how I would, it's like, of course I'm not going to love them less or different or, whatever. And so it's like, so there is an element of like, I don't want to be so harsh to judge, but then I also know that there's an element of like right and wrong and truth, that it's like, well,
Yeah, well, it's a commitment to the whole thing for me lately has been about committing. Like committing to the truth is really hard to do, because it takes your you want to commit, and that seems like an intense but more often it's like, first I got to step back from it and see what it is, and then make my commitment to these things. And one thing is like, if I'm a guy, I might not be the most masculine guy on the planet, or whatever things you think should be, and that's another confusing thing, is who's defining should?
Right. Exactly.
I don't, but once you figure out this is why I love this whole idea of philosophy, because it takes a lot of practice to understand morality. It's like exercising a muscle. You don't just get it. You're not just bestowed with an understanding of morality. You got to kind of practice it all the time. And it's just like building it's like exercising a muscle, or getting good at playing the drums or guitar or whatever. You got to practice it. And I think we have gotten, as a culture, totally out of shape on this practice, right? And that's why it's very rare. I don't know how many times you guys can go out and have a conversation like this with people in a public forum, like where there's more than a handful of people, and not get snuffed out by, we gotta shift this down. We gotta shift to Broncos or something, right?
You know what I've found lately, and this is just lately, but I would say last year or so, is that I have a lot of these, and they're really well received. And I mean, it starts a little different. It doesn't start white blood cell-ish. It starts with cancer reversal-ish.
Yeah.
Like, do you want a 3% success rate that poisons you, or do you want a 90% success rate that's no poison? And one is outside of you, the solution is, and the other one is internally, the solution is. But when you start it with that and people get fast, I think people are hungry for it. And I don't know if that's just a connection thing or if minds are actually opening. I like to think that minds are opening, but
I think it's two things. It's minds are opening, but then that thing is such a personal thing that's like, and it's so widespread that almost everybody knows somebody who's got some sort of affliction with that and connection to it. So then, yeah, that can be a really good door opener, I think.
Well, and it's just unarguable, you know, that the institute where I got certified in it, everything he teaches, all the methodology is empirically verified. It's not him philosophizing or something. Yeah. It's, you know, he used to say 90% success rate, and then he thought about it as actually 100% success rate when the people with cancer did exactly what he asked them to do. Like he bent his own rules a few times and let, you know, well-meaning medical professionals or well-meaning family enter the sacred space. Because what he used to do, he had this plot of land where he grew his own food and he had trails all through the woods and stuff. He grew his own food. He had his own animals and stuff. And people would just come with stage 3, stage 4 cancer. The mainstream medicine had done everything they could for them. They'd done all the alternative stuff they could do. And their life improved. The quality of their life improved, but their cancer was still advancing, right? And then they would come to this guy and he would just start talking to them about, okay, what was going on in your life and stuff. And they would unravel what he found. He's been doing this since 2008, and he would catalog it, kept really meticulous records. And now he knows, and therefore I know, because it's what he teaches, if a person presents with lung cancer, with pancreatic cancer, with brain cancer, I know what I'm looking for before.
Right.
The nuances of the individual manifestation and how it happened, the life circumstances are very individualized, but I know what I'm looking for. Like, as an example, in lung cancer, it's always unrepressed grief. And I'm not saying it's completely black and white, like cigarettes are not good, right? But it's not the root cause. It's not fundamentally like why are there people that smoke like a chimney for 60 years and never develop lung cancer? And people say genetic factors and everything. I think that's bullshit. But anyway, this is a tangent that I'm kind of excited about.
Germ theory.
It is. It's absolutely provably by medical
I don't know
doctors.
About that, dude, because
you can know about it.
How come a cold goes through my freaking house?
Because
it's not just, you're detoxing, now I'm detoxing, and you're detoxing too. It's
the reason, because terrain theory is very real and it's every bit as compelling. But there was two guys at the same time. One was on terrain theory, and one of them was Pasteur, and he was a member of the Illuminati. So he's on germ theory. So guess which one gets all the ticker tape parades and shit. It's not hard when you go down and it looks, and it can be marginalized and minimized and stuff. But when you look at this from a million different angles, all of it, all of life, every single category, it ain't hard.
Yeah,
it's really.
He's the flat earther too, so we're gonna.
Well, I don't know. Okay, so about the flat earth, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, and that's the point that I wanted to make about the cancer thing, is that his success rate is 100% if you look at it through the lens of the learning thing too. If you just say like, oh, I went there, and even if I didn't cure 100%, I still learned something which was really, really valuable that nobody else is teaching me, right?
Right.
That, I think, is another way to look at that too, is like,
yeah.
I think, and if we all look at things through that lens, then all that fear, shame, and guilt stuff goes away, because that's the source of it, is like, oh, we're measuring ourselves compared to some statistics, or like how provable it is, like these guys trying to prove God, and like, if I get enough people to believe me, then I'm going to be up here. And who cares? Like, as long as you know that I'm learning from the things that I'm exposed to, and I'm not using some man-made measuring stick for stuff. That's why I don't, the whole, like, we're always prone to measuring stuff so much. And the number one measuring stick is money. And that goes back to our whole thing that we were talking about earlier. All the addiction stuff is all oriented around money stuff. It's a bad measuring stick, is just one point that I'm trying to make.
I agree.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know where I'm going to go with that. But I mean, money was created to separate us from our divinity.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Well, and yeah, it's like if you go to the root of it, right? It's just people wanting power over other people.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because there's enough resources. I mean, there should be no starving people or third world countries. Like, there's enough abundance in this world for everyone
Absolutely, dude.
to live in harmony. Like, we don't even need to. I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious to talk to somebody like an expert about this. But in my mind, it's like, yeah, if you think about how much food gets thrown away and wasted, like Vegas, you know,
Yeah.
they're just probably dumpster full of
Right.
food, and all these other places where it's just excess and abundance. I'm thinking, like, imagine, and again, this is probably where Karl Marx got his whole like utopia, right? Where we could all like work together and
Right,
like, you know, everyone could do what they love and just relax and you know, we would just trade and share what we make and do. So, but we live in a sinful world, a fallen world, and so that's just
Yeah.
not. It's not going to.
Well,
That's why communism doesn't work. It's beautifully written.
Right.
I mean, if you read it, yeah, which is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But
Well, I don't even think utopia has anything to do with having enough food, or like we're going to suffer no matter what. We're like, suffering is part of our existence, and we got to resign ourselves to that. I think utopia is in here, and it's like going
Right.
back to that thing about like, if we can accept the suffering and just know that this is just a part of our life, and it's teaching us lessons.
dude,
that we
it's
need to
exciting
learn.
to suffer. Like when I was doing the Wim Hof thing, the cold
Oh,
shower,
yeah.
it sucked bad until I did it. And when I got out of the shower, man, I was like, let's go. And I bet you get the same feeling when you read the Bible verse. I bet you get the same feeling when you clean the house. Like, the thought of it conceptually sucks. What are we programmed? We're programmed, oh, you can get a YouTube right now. You just have that beer. You catch a little buzz in half a beer.
Yeah.
And this is one thing I wanted to talk about on your show.
It's our it's our show, guys.
But is the difference between happiness and joy. I mean, joy is a deep, constant state, and happiness is woohoo. You know, I just, you know, won the contest or whatever, and the hormones that go along with those are really well documented and studied. And dopamine is, which you get a shot of as soon as you hear your text or as soon as you get a phone call. Oh, you know, that's why
Yeah.
the notifications are so prevalent, so that you constantly are getting a squirt of dopamine. And what's the only so serotonin is the happy molecule,
Right.
and dopamine is serotonin is the joy molecule, the substantial
Yeah.
happiness, if you will, or joy. And pleasure. I'm sorry, it's not happiness versus
Joy versus happiness. Happiness
it's
versus
pleasure.
joy.
It's pleasure. Pleasure is a short term,
Yeah.
like, yay, I conquered the
Right.
girl or whatever, you know, for 10 minutes. Now what? And joy is a sustained state. It's the connection with source,
Yeah.
right? Truly, but we don't. That's a philosophy kind of. But serotonin is connected with deep, satisfying joy and deep happiness, and dopamine is with pleasure, the
quick.
the quick instant gratification that we're all programmed to like all the time. Turn on the TV, boom, I don't have to do anything else.
Right.
Hand in my pants, good, I'm good. Right. And so it's like, but it's interesting, right? Because God is so brilliant. I'm just always amazed at creation, right? What's the one thing that downregulates the true joy, which is serotonin? It's dopamine. So if you're in the middle of happiness, which is a cold shower, which is a Bible verse instead of scrolling, which is cleaning the house instead of something else, and your phone rings, I mean, part of the discipline is you turn that effing thing off.
Right.
You learn where that off button is, or if it goes, you don't listen to it, you know, because that'll take you out. It'll stop serotonin and it'll instantly go to dopamine, which is, let's just seek pleasure, because basically I'm miserable, you know, because I'm so unconfident, probably because I haven't been honoring myself for a long time. But anyway, I think that's interesting, that the juxtaposition, and this is by neuroscientists, it's really well known, but the difference between happiness and between pleasure and joy,
Yeah.
and the relationship serotonin versus dopamine.
And that's kind of what I'm like when I'm referring to rewarding. Like the rewarding thing is, I think, the equivalent to joy. Like when you're doing things that require your discipline, that you're deriving joy, or that's like what I'm saying. Like it's a rewarding proposition.
Yeah.
The reward is the dopamine thing, right? The reward is I'm going to the beach this weekend because I did all my. If you did all your work, then you can kind of feel good about that. But if you're just going out and jacking yourself off, that there was no investment in discipline to get to that.
Right.
But that's what they're doing with that thing. They're just giving us this free. They're just giving us this free reign to just have access to indulgence in.
Like you don't have to earn anything.
You don't have to earn anything.
Here it is.
Here's the dopamine. Here's the hit. Here's the hit.
Here's how you pick up chicks.
And because this world is so freaking abundant, well, the chicks thing is like unless you're into like online chicks. The chicks thing, like to go out and really conquer I'm using conquer in.
You sexist, misogynistic pig.
Trumper.
Women.
No, man, it's the ultimate.
Right. Yes,
we're propagating our population.
Well, and this is probably a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, we're getting short here, aren't we?
Because I mean, I was thinking about. I had a real tough time committing to women. I would do the conquering, and then as soon as I conquered, I'd like freak out and like bail.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
why was I able to conquer you?
I was like, oh, I'm like,
now
yeah.
she's all clingy. I gotta get out of here.
Like, oh no, yeah, exactly. Time out. So, but that's probably a whole nother.
That's
issue
a whole other
about.
issue. Yeah.
We need to get like a psychologist or something.
It's interesting though. We don't need a psychologist because they would actually point us in a direction. That would be no
True.
fun.
That would be no fun.
They're the most warped people out there.
I've known a few that I'm like, you
Seriously.
tell other people how to live their lives better. Yeah, you are a freaking train wreck.
Let's change seats here, pal.
You're a marriage counselor. You have 3 divorces. I don't want to listen to your advice.
No, I've had some really good counselors too. So
Yes, I'm sure.
There's all kinds.
Yes,
How we doing on time here, pal?
We're like an hour and a half in.
Are we?
Yeah.
You want to bust it
We're
up?
2 hours in.
Oh,
It's already 5:30.
No, we gotta cut this out. But we do need to solicit the subscriptions because our subscriptions are ridiculously low. So anybody out there who's got a generous bone in their body, throw us a like, thumbs up, subscribe.
Hit that bell icon so you get notified every single time a new episode arrives.
Or write us some comments. We need some feedbacks from the peanut gallery.
Shorts, I noticed.
Yeah, couple. I've responded to some of them. Thank you for the comments, guys. But yeah, all right. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Until next time.
See you then.